The director pulled me from the escalation meeting. His hand landed on my shoulder, not gentle, not professional, and steered me toward the hallway like I was furniture being rearranged. Behind us, the client representatives sat frozen mid-sentence, staring at their printouts of cascading system failures. The room still smelled like burnt coffee and panic. "You're too cautious for fast decisions," he said once the door clicked shut. His name was Sterling Vance, and he wore his authority like cologne, too much, applied too liberally. "This needs someone with instinct. Boldness. You understand." I nodded calmly. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting his face in unflattering angles. He waited for me to argue, to defend myself, to show some crack in my composure. I gave him nothing. "Good. Excellent. I'll handle this personally." He straightened his tie, already turning back toward the conference room where a $7 million contract was hemorrhaging credibility by the minute. I walked back to my office on the third floor, the operational floor, where the real work happened behind closed doors and under buzzing server racks. My badge still worked. My access codes were still active. And Sterling Vance had just made the most expensive assumption of his career. Let me clarify something about my role at South Bay Technologies. On paper, I'm listed as Senior Crisis Resolution Coordinator. It sounds middle management, sounds replaceable. Most executives treated it that way, a technical position, slightly elevated, but ultimately just another cog. In reality, I controlled the crisis escalation framework that every major account depended on. When million-dollar clients encountered critical failures, data breaches, infrastructure collapses, regulatory violations, my protocols determined response time, resource allocation, and recovery strategy. I didn't just coordinate. I had signature authority over emergency spending, direct lines to external contractors, and override access to deployment pipelines. The building we worked in, Glass Tower West on the harbor side, leased its entire infrastructure through interlocking agreements I negotiated personally. Network operations, security monitoring, backup systems, even the physical access controls tied back to provisions I'd embedded 3 years ago during our expansion. Sterling worked on the 15th floor with views of sailboats and sunset. He'd never seen the server rooms, never reviewed the service level agreements, never bothered to understand what kept the lights on. That ignorance was about to cost him everything. It happened in the main atrium 2 days later. Lunch hour. 50 people scattered across the marble floor with their salads and smartphones, half watching the fountain installation that management had commissioned to signal innovation. I was walking toward the exit, laptop bag over one shoulder, when Sterling appeared at the top of the central staircase. His voice carried across the vaulted space like a preacher addressing a congregation. "Venice." Perfect timing. Everyone looked up. He descended the stairs with theatrical purpose, each step deliberate. His entourage followed, 2 junior executives whose names I'd never bothered learning, plus Felicity Tran from legal, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I've been reviewing your performance metrics," Sterling announced, loud enough that conversations died in ripples. "Your risk assessment scores. Your decision velocity index." I stood still. Waited. "You're a liability." He stopped 3 feet away, arms crossed. "The Calderon contract nearly collapsed because you refused to authorize emergency overrides. The Westfield deployment delayed 2 weeks because you insisted on proper documentation. You're slowing us down." His junior executives nodded like dashboard bobbleheads. Felicity studied her phone. "Effective immediately, you're reassigned. Lateral move to quality assurance. Someone else will handle crisis management going forward." He smiled, showing teeth. "Nothing personal. Just business optimization." The atrium had gone completely silent. Even the fountain seemed to hold its breath. I let the moment stretch. Let him enjoy it. Then I adjusted my bag strap and spoke quietly. "I understand. Should I return my crisis authorization credentials, or will HR collect them?" He blinked. "What?" "My signature authority. Emergency spending clearance. Contractor network access. Should I deactivate those today, or wait for formal processing?" Just turn in your laptop to IT. They'll handle the technical details." "Understood. I'll begin transition documentation immediately." I turned toward the door, then paused. One question: who's taking over the escalation framework? I am. Personally. He said it like he was claiming a throne. Perfect. You'll do great. I pushed through the glass doors into the harbor wind, leaving him backlit against the fountain, victorious and doomed. My real office wasn't on the third floor. That space held my desk, my nameplate, my public-facing work. My real office occupied a converted storage room in the sublevel, tucked between the generator room and the backup cooling system. No windows. No visitors. Just screens, documentation, and direct access to the operational backbone of South Bay Technologies. I sat down in front of 6 monitors displaying system dashboards, contract management interfaces, and real-time monitoring feeds. Everything Sterling Vance assumed would continue running smoothly without me. The crisis escalation framework existed as a living document, 428 pages of protocols, authorities, and contingency procedures. But underneath the bureaucratic language lived something more important: dependency maps. Every major client account tied to specific technical resources I controlled. Every emergency authorization Sterling thought he'd inherited actually required my personal approval at the infrastructure level. He didn't know about the provisioning override system I'd built into our response pipeline. Couldn't see the service continuity agreements that gave me, not the company, me personally, final authority over certain critical functions. Had never read the vendor contracts that listed me by name as the sole authorized emergency contact. 3 years ago, when South Bay nearly collapsed under a ransomware attack, I'd rebuilt our entire crisis response architecture. Management gave me carte blanche. I'd used it to create something resilient, robust, and entirely dependent on my continued participation. Sterling had just severed that participation. I opened the framework documentation and began reviewing the transition requirements. By contract, by policy, by the very agreements that kept our clients operational, I had obligations. But those obligations were to the clients, to the integrity of the system, not to Sterling Vance's ego. Time to honor those obligations with absolute precision. Step 1: Credential Cascade. I started with the simple truth that Sterling's new role required credentials he didn't have. Crisis authorization wasn't a title, it was a security clearance tied to biometric verification, encrypted tokens, and multi-party approval workflows. I submitted the formal deactivation request for my own access, flagging the transition as Director-initiated reassignment. The system processed it immediately. My crisis credentials transitioned to suspended pending replacement authorization. The replacement authorization required board-level approval, security vetting, and technical certification, a process averaging 6 to 8 weeks. Sterling's access remained at his current level: executive dashboard, budget reports, and strategic planning tools. Nowhere near the emergency systems. I sent him a courtesy email outlining the situation. Professional. Helpful. Explaining the steps he'd need to take to restore full crisis response capability. I even attached the relevant policy documents, all 127 pages. Step 2: Contractor notification. Our crisis framework depended on 17 external contractors, cybersecurity firms, infrastructure specialists, data recovery services. Each contract listed me as primary contact for emergency activation. These weren't corporate relationships, they were personal connections built over years of 2 a.m. phone calls and last-minute miracles. I sent individual messages to each contractor, brief and factual. Change in my role. Authority transferred to Sterling Vance. Please update your emergency contact records. Here's his direct line. Then I waited. Within 4 hours, 12 of the 17 contractors replied. Most asked variations of the same question: is South Bay transitioning away from crisis response services? Several mentioned they'd worked exclusively through me, weren't sure about continuing under new management. 2 suggested we discuss alternative arrangements if I moved to a different company. I forwarded these responses to Sterling. FYI, I wrote. You'll want to reassure them of continuity. Step 3: The monitoring dashboard. The crisis dashboard aggregated real-time data from every major client, system health, threat indicators, performance metrics. I'd built it personally using a combination of proprietary tools and custom integration code. It ran on infrastructure I'd provisioned, using API keys I'd generated, feeding into analysis algorithms I'd refined over 3 years. I didn't take it down. That would be sabotage. I simply transferred it to maintenance mode. The screen still displayed data, but the predictive analysis functions, the early warning systems that caught problems before they became emergencies, went dormant. Without active monitoring, the dashboard became a rearview mirror instead of a radar system. Sterling wouldn't notice the difference until something went wrong. And by then, the something would already be critical. Step 4, Emergency Budget Authority. Crisis response required fast spending. When a client's infrastructure caught fire, you didn't wait for procurement approval, you threw resources at the problem and sorted invoices later. I held signature authority up to $250,000 for emergency contractor activation. That authority lived in the financial system as a special approval flag tied to my employee ID. I submitted the formal request to revoke it, citing my reassignment to quality assurance. Finance processed it within hours. Sterling's approval limit remained at his standard executive level, $50,000, requiring Director of Operations counter-signature above that threshold. For context, our average major crisis response cost $180,000. Step 5, the documentation library. Every crisis we'd managed lived in detailed case files: what went wrong, how we fixed it, what it cost, what we learned. Hundreds of incidents across dozens of clients, all stored in a shared repository that informed future responses. That repository existed on a document management system I'd configured personally. The access permissions defaulted to Crisis Team Only, a group that, as of my reassignment, no longer included me. I updated the permissions to reflect organizational reality. Sterling Vance, as the new crisis owner, received full access. But the system required his new credentials, the ones still pending board approval, to actually open the files. I sent him another helpful email explaining the situation. The documentation is available, I wrote. Just need your crisis authorization credentials to access. Should be ready in 6 to 8 weeks. Step 6, Client Communication Protocols. Our major clients had my direct contact information. When their CTO woke up at 3 a.m. to a security breach, they called me, not the company switchboard. That direct access meant faster response times, which meant smaller disasters, which meant retained contracts. I didn't block them. Didn't change my number. But I did send a professional update to each account executive: my role has changed. For crisis escalation, please route all requests through Sterling Vance. Here's his contact information. Then I enabled my out-of-office assistant: I'm no longer managing crisis escalation. For urgent issues, contact Sterling Vance directly at. 16 clients received this message. By evening, 11 had responded with some variation of "wait, what?" 3 days later, he burst in yelling, "Why did this spiral out of control?" Actually, it started before that. It started with small fractures nobody noticed immediately. Day 1 post-reassignment. The Carlyle Group encountered a routine database corruption, annoying but manageable with standard recovery protocols. Their infrastructure lead called Sterling's direct line at 9:47 a.m. The call went to voicemail. They tried the main crisis hotline. It rang through to an IT help desk that had no idea what crisis escalation meant. By 11:30 a.m., they'd lost 4 hours of transaction data. By 2 p.m., they'd escalated to their legal team, reviewing the service level agreement penalties. By 4 p.m., they'd contacted their former infrastructure consultant, one of my contractor friends, who called me directly. I listened sympathetically. Explained my situation. Confirmed I no longer held authority to help. Suggested they continue pressing Sterling's office. The contractor helped them anyway, as a favor to me, not to South Bay. We'd bill them later at premium emergency rates. Day 2. Hartfield Industries detected unusual network traffic at 6:15 a.m., potential security breach. Their protocol: immediate lockdown and crisis escalation. They called the emergency line. Got IT help desk again. Explained the situation. Help desk opened a standard ticket with 4-hour response time. By 10 a.m., the unusual traffic had been identified as a reconnaissance attack preceding ransomware deployment. By noon, they'd contained it themselves using procedures I'd documented 2 years ago. By 2 p.m., they'd sent a formal complaint to South Bay CEO about inadequate emergency response. Sterling replied personally, apologizing for the confusion, promising improved protocols. He didn't know the improved protocols required credentials he didn't have and contractors who weren't returning his calls. Day 3. The cascade began in earnest. Westmont Financial experienced a compliance violation during a regulatory audit, not a technical crisis, but a reputational emergency requiring immediate remediation documentation. They needed the case files from a similar incident we'd handled 18 months prior. They contacted Sterling. He tried to access the documentation library. Encountered the credential barrier. Called IT to override it. IT explained they couldn't override crisis-level security without proper authorization. Sterling insisted. IT opened an escalation ticket, estimated resolution time, 3 weeks. Westmont's general counsel sent a letter threatening breach of contract. Meanwhile, a second client hit a minor infrastructure hiccup that the monitoring dashboard should have caught hours earlier. Without predictive warnings, the hiccup cascaded into a partial service outage. Not catastrophic, but visible. Embarrassing. A third client attempted to activate their emergency contractor, only to discover the contractor had paused their South Bay relationship pending management clarification. By 5 p.m. on day 3, Sterling had 6 active fires, no water, and a growing suspicion that he'd stepped into something he didn't understand. I watched it unfold from my sub-level office on screens that still showed me everything. The monitoring system remained in maintenance mode, but I maintained read-only access, couldn't change anything, but could observe the deterioration. Each incident appeared on my dashboard like a dot on a map, blinking from yellow to orange to red. I'd see the initial problem, watch the delayed response, observe the escalation. It felt like watching someone try to defuse a bomb using instructions written in a language they didn't speak. My phone buzzed constantly. Contractors asking for clarification. Clients requesting my personal intervention. Former colleagues wondering what was happening. I replied to each with the same professional courtesy. I've been reassigned to quality assurance. Sterling Vance handles crisis management now. Please direct all inquiries to him. Technically accurate. Entirely unhelpful. The beautiful thing about procedural revenge is its deniability. I hadn't sabotaged anything. Hadn't deleted files, blocked access, or fed anyone false information. I'd simply stopped doing unpaid labor that fell outside my new job description. The crisis framework didn't collapse because I attacked it, it collapsed because it required active, expert maintenance that nobody else could provide. On the afternoon of day 3, my phone rang. Caller ID showed Sterling's mobile. I let it go to voicemail. The message he left ran 2 minutes, starting professional and ending desperate. Venice, I need your help. Multiple situations developing. Some confusion about access protocols. Can we talk? I didn't call back. Instead, I sent an email, happy to discuss during regular business hours. Please submit a formal consultation request through quality assurance channels so I can properly allocate time. Looking forward to supporting your success in this new role. The corporate equivalent of watching someone drown while explaining proper lifeguard request procedures. He burst into my sub-level office at 7:43 a.m. on day 4, skipping past the badge reader by tailgating behind a facilities technician. His suit looked slept in. His hair, normally sculpted with product, stuck up at odd angles. Why did this spiral out of control? His voice cracked on control. Behind him, 2 members of his executive team hovered uncertainly in the doorway. I swiveled in my chair, unhurried. 6 monitors glowed behind me, showing the cascading failures in real-time detail. Which spiral specifically? The Carlisle data loss? The Hartfield security breach? The Westmont compliance situation? I kept my voice level, almost curious. Were the 3 new incidents that developed overnight while you were presumably sleeping? All of it. He stepped forward, then seemed to remember the witnesses. Lowered his voice. You were supposed to transition this properly. I did transition it properly. I've submitted all required documentation, deactivated my credentials per protocol, notified all relevant parties of the management change. Everything by the book. I gestured to one screen showing an email chain. I even sent you detailed handoff notes. Did you read them? His face suggested he had not. The problem, Sterling, is that crisis management isn't a title. It's a technical specialization with specific authorities, vendor relationships, and system access. You removed me from the role but didn't complete the transition steps. The framework is sitting in bureaucratic limbo. Then fix it. I don't have authority to fix it. I'm in quality assurance now. Remember? Too cautious for fast decisions. I let that hang in the air. You'd need to submit a cross-departmental consultation request, get approval from. Forget the bureaucracy. We have clients threatening to leave. I'm aware. I've been monitoring the situation. I turned back to my screens. As an interested observer, of course. Since it's no longer my responsibility. One of his executives, a thin man with wireframe glasses, cleared his throat. Ms. Dawson, perhaps we could discuss a temporary consulting arrangement? Just until the formal transition completes. Now we were getting somewhere. The meeting happened 4 hours later in a conference room I'd never seen before, one of the executive floor spaces with actual artwork and ergonomic chairs. Present, Sterling, his 2 executive shadows, Felicity Tran from Legal, our CFO Harold Kensington, and myself. Harold opened with numbers. We've quantified the impact so far. Carlisle incident, $340,000 in penalties and recovery costs. Hartfield, $180,000 plus reputational damage. Westmont, ongoing, but legal estimates $500,000 minimum. 3 additional incidents developing as we speak. Total exposure approaching $2 million across a 4-day period. Sterling sat rigid, staring at the table. Additionally, Harold continued, we've received formal complaints from 6 clients, cancellation threats from 2, and extremely uncomfortable questions from the board. This situation requires immediate resolution. He looked at me. Everyone looked at me. I folded my hands on the table. I'm happy to help restore operational stability. However, we need to be clear about the situation. Sterling removed me from crisis management citing performance concerns. Those concerns were documented publicly. If I return to the role now, it raises obvious questions about judgment and decision-making. Felicity jumped in. We're prepared to clarify that the reassignment was based on a strategic restructuring conversation, not a performance assessment. Sterling spoke inartfully in the moment. Sterling's jaw tightened, but he nodded. That addresses the political optics, I said. But not the operational reality. The crisis framework exists in its current state because I built it that way over 3 years. Restoring it isn't a matter of flipping a switch. It requires reconstructing vendor relationships, reactivating system configurations, and rebuilding client confidence. That's months of work. We don't have months, Harold said quietly. No, you don't. I paused, looking at each face around the table. But I might have a faster solution. I opened my laptop and projected a document onto the screen. 3 days ago, I was contacted by Blackstone Industrial Group. They're expanding their manufacturing operations and need dedicated crisis infrastructure for their 12 regional facilities. They asked if I'd be interested in consulting independently. Sterling's eyes widened. You're leaving? I was considering it. Blackstone is offering extremely generous terms for exclusive services. But I haven't accepted yet. I advanced to the next slide. Here's my counterproposal for South Bay. The room went silent as they read. Proposal summary. Restore Venice Dawson to Senior Crisis Resolution Coordinator with enhanced authority. 3-year contract, guaranteed, with substantial retention bonus. Seat on Operational Planning Committee. Direct report to CEO, not divisional management. Sterling Vance removed from all crisis oversight responsibilities. Public statement acknowledging the reassignment was an error in judgment. The last point hung in the air like a challenge. This is extortion, Sterling said quietly. No, I replied. This is a business proposal addressing a business problem you created. You're free to decline. But if you do, I'll accept Blackstone's offer tomorrow, and you'll spend the next 6 months explaining to the board why your ego cost the company its crisis infrastructure and approximately $15 million in at-risk contracts. Harold looked at Felicity. Felicity looked at Sterling. Sterling looked like he wanted to flip the table. I need time to consider. No. I closed my laptop. You need to decide now. The Westmont situation escalates to their board tomorrow morning. The Hartfield security audit report goes to regulators on Friday. Carlisle's legal team is drafting breach of contract papers. Every hour you wait makes the damage exponentially worse. Yes or no, Sterling? The silence stretched. Outside the windows, harbor traffic moved peacefully, oblivious to the small corporate drama unfolding above. Harold spoke first. I recommend acceptance. The board will support it. Felicity nodded. From a legal standpoint, this resolves multiple liability concerns. Sterling sat frozen, his career balanced on a decision he couldn't avoid. Finally, voice barely audible, he spoke. Fine. Whatever it takes. I smiled, small, professional, merciless. Excellent. Felicity, please draft the paperwork. I'll need executive authorization reactivated by end of business today. Harold, let's discuss the retention bonus structure. Sterling. I looked at him directly for the first time since entering the room. Thank you for your leadership on this matter. I'm sure quality assurance will benefit tremendously from your strategic oversight going forward. The transfer happened at 4:47 p.m. Sterling Vance, effective immediately, assumed responsibility for quality assurance operations. No public statement about the reasons. No ceremony. Just an updated org chart and a terse email from HR. I was back in the crisis framework by 5 p.m. The first 72 hours back felt like performing surgery on a moving patient. I started with triage, identifying which fires needed immediate attention versus which could be managed through careful stabilization. Carlyle Group got a personal call from me at 6 p.m. that evening. I'm back in my previous role. Let's talk about making this right. We negotiated a partial penalty waiver in exchange for enhanced future service terms. They agreed, mostly because they trusted me personally more than they trusted South Bay institutionally. Hartfield Industries required more delicate handling. Their security chief had been burned by the delayed response and wasn't interested in apologies. I offered something better, a complete infrastructure audit at no charge, performed by my top contractor, with findings delivered directly to their board. Show them you're taking security seriously by bringing in external validation. They accepted, impressed that I was willing to expose our own vulnerabilities. Westmont Financial needed speed. I pulled their historical case files, using my restored credentials, and delivered the compliance documentation within 3 hours. Their general counsel withdrew the breach threat but made clear we were on probation. By the end of week 1, I'd contained the bleeding. By week 2, I'd begun rebuilding. Contractors who'd paused their relationships received personal calls. The management confusion is resolved. I'm back. Let's discuss renewed terms. Most came back, some at premium rates they absolutely deserved. The monitoring dashboard came out of maintenance mode. Predictive analysis resumed. The early warning system started catching problems again before they became catastrophes. And Sterling Vance? Quality assurance operated from the 4th floor, above operations, below executives. A liminal space for people neither technical enough for engineering nor strategic enough for leadership. Sterling moved into an office with a window view of the parking structure. His new responsibilities involved reviewing testing protocols, attending compliance meetings, and generating reports nobody read with urgency. Important work, theoretically. In practice, a professional purgatory. I saw him occasionally in the elevator. He'd stare at the floor numbers, silent. Once, around week 3, we ended up alone for 8 floors. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it. The doors opened on the lobby. He walked out without a word. The atrium where he'd publicly humiliated me became a space I passed through twice daily. Sometimes I'd pause by the fountain, remembering his theatrical descent down the staircase, his triumphant smile. The marble floor held no memory of that moment. The water splashed indifferently. But I remembered. And more importantly, everyone else remembered. The story circulated through corporate gossip channels with the inevitability of a virus. Did you hear what happened with Sterling in Venice? He tried to replace her, everything collapsed, she basically held the company hostage until they gave her his authority. Details varied, but the essential narrative remained consistent. Sterling became a cautionary tale. A warning about underestimating technical expertise. A reminder that visibility doesn't equal importance. 3 months after my restoration, the company restructured executive reporting lines. Sterling's position was eliminated in favor of organizational efficiency. He received a severance package and a polite goodbye email from HR. No atrium announcement. No theatrical exit. I heard later he'd taken a role at a mid-size firm in another city. lower title, less prestige. But honestly, I didn't follow up. The real vindication came 6 months later when Blackstone Industrial Group returned to discussions. Not for external consulting, for partnership. They wanted to license the crisis escalation framework I'd built. Wanted me to train their internal teams, customize it for manufacturing environments, create a version they could deploy across their entire operation. Wanted it enough to pay licensing fees that made Harold Kensington's eyes widen during negotiations. The deal took 3 months to structure. Blackstone's technical team treated me with the kind of respect Sterling never had, asking intelligent questions, challenging assumptions productively, recognizing expertise when they saw it. Their implementation lead, a sharp woman named Veronica Ashton, summed it up during one planning session: "You built something remarkable here. Most crisis systems are reactive band-aids. Yours is predictive architecture. That's the difference between amateur and expert." The contract generated recurring revenue for South Bay and established my framework as an industry-recognized methodology. The board gave me a retention bonus that made my original demanded terms look modest. My title expanded to include strategic infrastructure in front of all the existing words. And Sterling's name disappeared from the organizational history, replaced by a footnote about transitional management restructuring. 2 years later, I still work from the sub-level office. Still prefer the hum of servers to the performative energy of executive floors. Still arrive early and leave late, maintaining systems that keep millions of dollars flowing smoothly through corporate infrastructure. But the dynamics shifted. When I walk through the atrium now, junior employees nod respectfully. Executives schedule time on my calendar instead of summoning me to theirs. My input gets requested during strategic planning, not just crisis response. I hired a small team, carefully selected people who understand that infrastructure isn't glamorous but is absolutely essential. We operate quietly, preventing disasters that never make headlines precisely because we stopped them before they became visible. Last month, a new executive director joined South Bay's leadership team. Young, ambitious, fresh from some prestigious consulting firm. During his introductory tour, someone brought him down to the operational level to meet me. He glanced around my modest office: no windows, no artwork, just screens and documentation, and I watched him make the same calculation Sterling once made. Saw him categorize me as technical staff, important but ultimately subordinate. "So you handle the day-to-day crisis stuff?" he asked, already thinking about his next meeting. "Something like that." "Great, great. Important work. Keep it up." He was already turning toward the door. "Director Morrison," I said quietly. He paused. "Before you go, one small administrative note. Your executive access credentials automatically include oversight for budget approvals up to $50,000. If you ever need to authorize emergency spending above that threshold, you'll need to go through the crisis escalation framework. I can walk you through the procedures whenever you're ready." He nodded absently. Sure. I'll have my assistant set something up." "Perfect. Looking forward to it." He left. My newest team member, a brilliant systems architect named Talia Westbrook, looked up from her workstation. "Think he'll make the same mistake Sterling did?" "Probably not." I turned back to my screens. "But if he does, at least we've optimized the correction process. Should only take 3 days this time instead of 4. She laughed. We returned to work. The servers hummed their steady rhythm. The monitoring dashboard blinked green across 17 major accounts. The crisis framework ticked forward, invisible and essential, keeping disasters at bay through the unglamorous labor of people nobody noticed until something went wrong. And somewhere, in some other city, Sterling Vance was learning the same lesson I'd taught him: foundations matter more than facades. Competence outlasts confidence. And the people you dismiss today might be the only ones who can save you tomorrow. But by then, they might not feel particularly motivated to try.